Coming up here on The Watchman, Joel Rosenberg is here with all the latest news on the prophetic implications of everything unfolding right now in Israel's war with Hamas in Gaza and possibly beyond. That's coming up. Hey folks, Erick Stakelbeck here. Welcome to The Watchman. We are in New York City on day 19 of Israel's war with Hamas terrorists in Gaza. Now we have a lot to unpack today, folks. Some breaking on-the-ground updates from Joel Rosenberg, host of the Rosenberg Report on TBN. He will be joining us shortly also to fill in some of the prophetic implications of everything we are seeing right now, including some staggering and disturbing comments today by Turkish President Recep Erdogan regarding Hamas and Israel. You won't want to miss that. That is coming up. But up first, here is the state of play right now. As I mentioned, day 19, over 1,400 Israelis slaughtered, obviously, in that October 7th massacre, that invasion of southern Israel by Hamas. Now we're hearing a few things. Number one, that the United States, the Biden administration, has asked Israel to delay its ground invasion. Now, we've been discussing this on The Watchman. Many have been asking, why has Israel not invaded yet? We're going on nearly 3 weeks since that October 7th massacre. Well, there's a lot of reasons, folks, going on behind the scenes, but one reason clearly is pressure from the United States. In essence, according to the Wall Street Journal, what the U.S. is saying is, look, when you invade Hamas, not if, but when Israel invades Gaza, and crushes Hamas decisively, U.S. officials are saying, look, we're very concerned that the Iranian regime will unleash its proxies in response and target U.S. assets across the region. Now, folks, over the past few days, as we have reported here on The Watchman, U.S. bases in Syria and Iraq have been attacked repeatedly by Iran-sponsored Shia militia proxy terror groups. Remember, there are some 900 U.S. soldiers in Syria right now, at least 2,000 in Iraq, several bases housing U.S. soldiers, and time again, over the past 2.5 years, those bases have come under fire. Over 80 times come under fire from Iran-backed proxies, drones, rockets, missiles, and we've seen an uptick in that over the past few weeks as tensions obviously intensify in the Middle East. So tonight, we're going to unpack this more, this delay, perhaps, in Israel's ground invasion in Gaza. Is that a good thing, or does that help Israel's cause? We're going to discuss it tonight on TBN. You can also watch on the TBN app at 9:30 p.m. Eastern Time, our latest episode of Israel Under Fire, a weekly special program we're doing on TBN every week. As this war unfolds, we will interview the top international spokesman for the Israel Defense Forces, Jonathan Conricus. He is joining us tonight, 9:30 p.m. Eastern. You can watch it on TBN and the TBN app, Israel Under Fire, and we will really break down the coming ground invasion with the military spokesman and what that all looks like and what the U.S. is saying. A lot to unpack there for sure. In the meantime, quick reminder, if you have not subscribed to The Watchman right here on YouTube, be sure to subscribe and click the notification bell so you get alerts every time a new video is posted. We're bringing you the kinds of stories the mainstream media just isn't covering. One of them unfolded today as well, folks, when leaders from Hamas, Palestinian Islamic Jihad, and Hezbollah met in Beirut. Hezbollah leader Sheikh Hassan Nasrallah was part of this terror summit in the city of Beirut, and who knows what they were talking about, but it certainly wasn't anything good. The official record said they were discussing their war strategy going forward against Israel. Again, this is a collection of terror leaders, Israel's worst enemies, 3 terror proxies, Hamas, Islamic Jihad, and Hezbollah, closely collaborating. And this should really come as no surprise if you watch The Watchman on a regular basis, because, folks, look, over the past 2 months, In the run-up to October 7th in particular, we had been sharing with you repeatedly about these consistent meetings taking place in Beirut involving Hezbollah, Hamas, Islamic Jihad, and many times representatives of Iran's Islamic Revolutionary Guards Corps. And I'm sure they weren't just getting together to plan a picnic or a family reunion. A jihad reunion is more like it, and a jihadist assault on Israel. Iran's fingerprints are all over what happened on October 7th, as we have discussed here many times. And in terms of what happened on October 7th, a quick note before we go to Joel Rosenberg and the prophetic implications of this all. I'm talking about Psalm 83, Ezekiel 38 and 39, Isaiah 17, and Turkey's role in all of this and those troubling comments today by Recep Erdogan about Israel and Hamas. But up first, speaking of October 7th, just so it stays fresh in your mind, because many right now in the world, in the so-called international community, seem to have forgotten about what happened on October 7th. Yes, I know it's only 19 days ago, but their memories seem to be very short as they shift from concern about slaughtered Israeli civilians, men, women, children, and the elderly, and Israeli hostages in Hamas's clutches in Gaza, and their concern more and more shifts to Gaza and to the Palestinians and Israel's supposed war crimes in Gaza, which are anything but. The sole responsibility for civilians in Gaza rests with Hamas, as we've been telling you here every day on the Watchman. But just a reminder, and it's not always pleasant, here is some captured audio from October 7th, a Hamas terrorist who was taking part in the slaughter of Jewish women, children, the elderly, babies, toddlers in southern Israel, phoned home to his father, and the Israel Defense Forces were able to get a hold of this audio recording. It's stunning, but you need to hear it. Take a listen.
الو يابا يابا انا قاعد بكلمك من جوبا بسيم. افتح الواتس تبعه قول له وين شوف كيف القتله، شوف كيف قتلت بيدي يابا، ابنك قتل يهود، هاي دخلوا فلسطين يابا. الله اكبر، ربنا يحميك يا رب، ربنا يحميك يابا، ربنا يحميك يابا. قاعد بكلمك من جوال يهوديه قتلتها وقتلت جوزها، عطوا بيدي يابا، الله اكبر ولله الحمد، الله اكبر ولله الحمد. يابا افتح الواتس شوف كيف قتلت يابا، افتح بتدوس عليك واتس قول له وين بروح. ربنا يوفقك بالسلامه يابا يابا بسيم يابا يابا والله 10 قتلت 10 بيدي يابا يابا على ايدي اعطينا امي يما يما يحميك يما طول الليل ادعي لك 10 بيدي يما طول الليل 10 يما بيدي قتلت طول الليل ادعي لك يما طول الليل ادعي لك ربنا يرحمك بالسلامه يما ربنا يرحمك يما بعمل لك تبص مباشر من جوا ادعي لك يما طول الليل ادعي معاك يما ربنا يحميك يما
In case you had any doubt still, and I hope you don't, but if you did, about what Israel is up against, and the free world by extension, there you go. Folks, Hamas is a demonic death cult. You just heard it straight from their mouths. This man, if you can call him that, boasting about slaughtering Jews, the blood on his hands, and his parents actually praising him, weeping tears of joy. They were absolutely gleeful. They were exhilarated in the wake of their son slaughtering innocent men, women, and children completely unprovoked in southern Israel. And the glee in his voice, folks, this is a spiritual battle. Hello. If you didn't think so before you heard that recording, wake up. We battle not against flesh and blood, but against spirits and principalities. The Antichrist spirit. I can't think of any more clear indicator or example of it than what you just heard on that call. And that is pretty much par for the course among the Hamas terrorists who took part in the October 7th massacre. I've never heard anything like that. The glee in his voice, like he just accomplished the greatest thing in his life. His crowning achievement in his life, and his parents agreed wholeheartedly, was that he just massacred 10 Jews. But there's more. Some of those Hamas terrorists were captured alive who took part in the October 7th massacre. Again, 1,400 murdered by Hamas on that day, mostly civilians, women, children, the elderly, burnt, beheaded. We've discussed this on the newscast, but some seem to forget. But in case you did, again, the Israel Defense Forces, as I mentioned, captured some of these Hamas terrorists. They interrogated them, and these Hamas terrorists shared what their overlords told them to do once they burst through the fence and invaded southern Israel. Take a look.
هو التعميمات في بخصوص المدنيين كانت اللي هو يعني قتل الرجال الأسر اللي هو النساء والمسنين والأطفال.
طهروا البيوت واخطفوا قد ما تقدروا أسرى لأنه في غزة اللي باخذ أسرى له مكافأة.
قديش المكافأة قالوا لكم؟
شقة منزل بيت $10,000.
اللي بيجيب كل أسير باخذ شقة ومنزل؟ مين قال لكم إياها هاي؟
كانوا يحكوها في القسام يعني.
$10,000 for every Israeli dragged back to the bowels of hell into the tunnels beneath Gaza, to every Hamas jihadist. And, you know, these interrogations, folks, we just showed you a small snippet there, but they are pretty lengthy. And in one, a Hamas terrorist told the Israel Defense Forces interrogator, we became like animals. I'm quoting him directly. As soon as we entered southern Israel, we became like animals, and we did things that human beings don't do. I would wholeheartedly agree with that. That's exactly what happened, because you're dealing with a demonic entity, modern-day Nazis. That is who Hamas is. How would the world approach Hitler and the Nazi regime today? You have to wonder, with the treatment of Hamas, where yesterday the UN Secretary General says, well, Hamas's attacks didn't happen in a vacuum. Israel has been oppressing the Palestinians for years and years. Kind of, sort of, or absolutely did seem like he was excusing Hamas's actions. And Israel's ambassador to the UN, Gilad Erdan, called him on the carpet, as did Israel's Foreign Minister Eli Cohen. They were both at the UN Security Council yesterday. Gilad Erdan called on Antonio Guterres, the UN Secretary General, to resign, and rightly so, for his explaining away of Israel's 9/11, the greatest massacre of the Jewish people since the Holocaust. Folks, we talk about the state of play, so to speak. That is the state of things right now. There is a global, demonic, anti-Semitic, anti-Israel wave unfolding right now. And as for me and my family, we will serve the Lord, and we will stand with Israel through thick and thin. We have a biblical mandate as followers of Jesus. I am a Christian. We have many here watching who aren't Christians. All are welcome. But just so you know, where we stand here on the Watchman, unapologetically, we are followers of Jesus, and we are approaching this from a truthful perspective, number one, but unapologetically from a biblical perspective. I can't say the same for Hamas's leaders. Let's go real quick. If you wonder where this is coming from, the inspiration for these massacres, for the terror attacks, for all the madness you're seeing in the Middle East right now, if you wonder where it's coming from, hey, the UN Secretary General said it's not happening in a vacuum. It certainly isn't. It's not happening in a vacuum because Hamas's top leaders are actively encouraging this and giving the ideological ammo for the massacres. Don't believe me? Here they are in their own words.
اللهم عليك بيهود شل أركانهم ودمر كيانهم اللهم مكننا من رقاب يهود اللهم مكننا من رقاب يهود فلقد اقترب يوم ذبحكم وصالكم والقضاء عليكم حتى لا يبقى يهودي ولا صهيوني على وجه هذه الأرض. عقيدتنا في قتالكم أننا سنبيدكم على بكرة أبيكم ولن نبقي منكم أحدا.
اقتلوهم حيث ثقفتموه، ما فيش بنعرفش حدد وين ما بنستطيع سنقاومهم.
التي يتبر فيها ملكهم ويباد فيها أبناؤهم.
اللهم عليك باليهود ومن والاهم، اللهم عليك بالأمريكان ومن والاهم، اللهم احصهم عددا واقتلهم بددا ولا تغادر منهم أحدا.
Now, I remind you, those are comments spewed forth by some of Hamas's very top leaders, folks. This is the top echelon of Hamas's leadership, and this is what those 1,500, perhaps as many as 2,500 Hamas terrorists who broke into southern Israel on October 7th were listening to before their invasion, their leaders imploring them to commit genocide against the Jewish people. Now, you would think that a NATO member nation would condemn such rhetoric and roundly condemn such actions. But then there is Recep Tayyip Erdogan, the president of Turkey. Under his rule, Turkey, which is a NATO member nation, remember, the second largest military in all of NATO behind the United States, but under the radical rule of Recep Erdogan, we refer here on the Watchman to Turkey as NINO, NATO in name only. Why do I say that? Take a look at Recep Erdogan's comments today about Hamas and Israel.
Bir terör örgütü değil, topraklarını ve vatandaşlarını koruma mücadelesi veren, evet, bir kurtuluş ve bir mücahitler grubu.
Folks, that's a leader of a NATO member nation, officially an ally of the United States and the West, calling Hamas a liberation group, mujahideen, holy warriors fighting for the liberation of their land, and they are not terrorists, according to Recep Erdogan. Well, we are joined by someone right now who knows a lot about Recep Erdogan, about the Hamas movement, and much more, and the prophetic implications of it all. Our good friend Joel Rosenberg joins us now from Jerusalem, host of the Rosenberg Report on TBN. You can find him here on YouTube as well, and editor-in-chief of All Israel News. Joel, welcome. Always great to see you, my friend. I wish it was under better circumstances, of course, but quick take here before we unpack things a little bit more. What's your instant reaction, I guess you would say, to these comments by Recep Erdogan, the Turkish leader?
Well, Recep Erdogan, first of all, good to see you, Eric. But Erdogan has just fully unmasked himself now. This is the type of rhetoric that he was using several years ago, for more than a decade. He was elected first as prime minister, later as president, as a moderate. But then he began to slowly gain power, consolidate power. And once he had full authoritarian, autocratic, tyrannical control of Turkey, then he started to become more aggressive against Israel and for radical Sunni Islam. But then when his economy was in trouble about a year and a half ago, he began to try to do a rapprochement with Jerusalem. And but now he realizes this is the moment. He wants to become the sultan of all radical Sunni Islam, just the way the supreme leader of Iran is the leader of all Shia apocalyptic and radical Islamism. So this is a bid for control right now by Erdogan, and this is proof that he is our enemy, and Erdogan is moving rapidly away from NATO, closer and closer to Russia, Iran, and Hamas.
Joel, I want to ask you about Iran and some of your recent work and commentary on the issue, but real quick, Turkey in particular, a prophetic player in your view? I think of Ezekiel 38 and 39, that coming war of Gog and Magog. Do you think Turkey, you mentioned Russia and Iran, we see those nations coming closer. Is Turkey in the future a prophetic player in your view that will come against Israel ultimately?
It is. There's no question about it. I wrote about it in my first nonfiction book that I ever wrote, Epicenter. And in my most recent nonfiction book, Enemies and Allies, I went into this issue again. And there's no question that Turkey in the Bible is an enemy in the last days. Obviously, it was the base camp of enormous amounts of preaching and teaching by the Apostle Paul and his team in the first century. But as we get to the end of days, what we know is modern day Turkey will be a terrible, wicked enemy of Israel. In Ezekiel 38, it's described as by an ancient named Gomer and Beth Togarmah. And so this, the question is, is Turkey, which has been a Western NATO ally, as you say, I like your point, NATO in name only. I had not heard that term, Eric, but I think it's apt. Turkey is clearly turning under Erdogan to the dark side, building closer and closer ties to Russia and Iran, even buying Russian military hardware. And this is insane. What NATO country would ever be in league with Vladimir Putin? But one more point here, geopolitically, Eric, before we talk about the prophecies, think about it this way. Just take the Etch-a-Sketch of this whole conversation for a second, clear the screen, and go with this one thought. What are the only two countries right now that are directing their military assets to invade democratic countries and slaughter them at will? That's Russia under Vladimir Putin going into Ukraine, and Iran under the supreme leader Ali Khamenei using Hamas and getting ready to send Hezbollah in as well. So those are the two countries. Communist China, horrible, but hasn't invaded Taiwan yet. North Korea, horrible, but hasn't fired an ICBM that can hit the United States yet, right? So who's invading? Who are the monsters on the planet? Russia and Iran, just as the Bible said it would be. But that's a geopolitical analysis right now. It's pretty sobering.
Yeah, it is. And you laid out Ezekiel 38, 39, Joel, and Turkey, Iran, Russia. It doesn't end well for them ultimately as they meet their demise, their forces on the mountains of Israel. But Psalm 83 is a passage that a lot have been talking about in recent weeks as this war has begun in Gaza. And you wrote about it on All Israel News. And folks, you can find Joel, All Israel News, allisrael.com. Great site with all things Middle East. But you wrote about Psalm 83. I want to read a passage from Psalm 83 real quick, Joel. Israel's enemies, as Psalm 83 lays out, it says, with cunning they conspire against your people, Israel. They plot against those you cherish. Come, they say, let us destroy them as a nation, so that Israel's name is remembered no more. With one mind, they plot together. They form an alliance against you. Edom and the Ishmaelites, Moab and the Hagrites, Byblos, Ammon, Amalek, Philistia, which would be Gaza, the people of Tyre, Lebanon, even Assyria has joined them. Joel, I look at the map right now, Lebanon, Gaza, Syria, Iraq, nations that are hostile to Israel, and also Judea and Samaria in the so-called West Bank. We've got, obviously, terror movements there. What are your thoughts on Psalm 83 and its relevance to what we're seeing right now?
Sure. Well, Eric, many Christians pay no attention to Old Testament prophecies, whether they're eschatological or not, unless they're messianic. But for those who are interested in Bible prophecy and believe it's relevant and gives us insights to what God wants to tell us about the future, it really comes down into two camps. The smaller camp says that Psalm 83 is a specific end times prophecy in which it lists that group of countries that you just mentioned, and that those are ancient names that have modern day references, as you referred to, and that there's going to be a specific war, a Psalm 83 war in the end of times. And those who say this believe that it'll be a war that comes before the war of Gog and Magog. It's an interesting approach. I don't subscribe to it. I would be in a different camp. I wouldn't rule that out, but it does. Psalm 83 doesn't have the classic pieces of almost every other end times prophecy with a thus saith the Lord, or in the last days this will happen, or it shall happen in that day or in that hour, or any of those types of elements. The Psalm 83 is a prayer, and I think that it is prophetic, but that it's not a prophetic about a specific war, but it's a prophetic X-ray or MRI, let's say, into the mind and the heart and the souls of the people that will hate Israel and have genocidal intentions to wipe us off the planet at that time it was written, but all the way up to and including the end of days. And there, the scripture you just put on the screen, let's come and conspire together, let's wipe them out, let their name be remembered no more. That is the genocidal intention of the Iranian leadership. That is the genocidal ambition and intention of the Hamas leadership, and the genocidal ambition and intentions of the Hezbollah leadership. And I would add now one the Houthis in Yemen, which just fired a salvo of cruise missiles from Yemen. We've never, that I am aware of, Eric, I'll cross-check with you, but I don't think we've ever been attacked in Israel by Houthi terrorists that are funded, armed, and supplied by Iran. But thank God, a U.S. Navy presence in the Red Sea took down most of them, and the Saudis dramatically took out one of the cruise missiles headed for Israel. This is the first time I think the Saudi military has ever interceded to defend the state of Israel. So I think Psalm 83 is a prophetic window into the thinking, the genocidal mindset. I don't think it's a specific war, but we're seeing Psalm 83 play out right now for sure.
Yeah, no doubt, Joel. Hey, look, if you are just joining us, folks, we are with Joel Rosenberg, our good friend, editor-in-chief of All Israel News, allisrael.com, host, of course, of the Rosenberg Report on TBN every Thursday and Saturday night. You can also find Joel here on YouTube. Joel Rosenberg on TBN is the channel, so check him out there as well, or right here, I should say, on YouTube. Joel, you wrote on allisrael.com last week, and you talked about this in a YouTube exclusive for the Rosenberg Report, that Israel's leadership right now, perhaps, and you said, look, I don't have any inside information on this, but perhaps maybe talking about broadening this offensive to include not only Hamas, but perhaps decisively crushing Hezbollah, even going to the head of the snake, the Iranian regime as well, Iran's nuclear facilities perhaps. What are your thoughts on where this may all be going? It seems like this could very well stretch far beyond Gaza.
Yeah, this is the question that's going on in Israel. It divides into two parts, Eric. And I've traveled this country over the last 18 days of the war from the south. Last week, my show on TBN, the Rosenberg Report, was right on the border in two of the closest communities to Gaza. And we coming under rocket fire. I think you guys actually have it on screen in a moment. But yeah, it was pretty chilling. The Israeli officials wanted to show me and a group of foreign ambassadors the atrocities, where these atrocities had happened. They wanted us to understand how dangerous it was. And while we were there in Sderot, you're going to see it in about 5 seconds, the alarms go off and we go running for your lives. You only have 15 seconds to get in the bomb shelter. We didn't make it to the bomb shelter before the explosions started happening all over our heads. And one of the ambassadors, a very sweet woman, tripped and face planted right in front of me. Fortunately, my TBN cameraman and I were able to scoop her up by her bulletproof vest and get her inside the bomb shelter. So that's aired last week. This week, that'll air tomorrow night at 9 Eastern. I take you to the northern border, and right now there's shelling, there's missiles coming in, there's artillery rounds. Hezbollah is actively attacking Israel. And everybody I've interviewed all across the country, but particularly in the north, say what they fear, Eric, is not the invasion by and the coming war with Hezbollah and Iran. What they fear is that the leadership in Israel won't have the courage to go strike hard, fast, and first to take out the Iranian threat and the Hezbollah threat. That they're actually worried because they say, as one Jewish Israeli 25-year veteran of the IDF intelligence forces up on the north, he said to me, "Look, Joel, I'm not a Christian. I'm not an evangelical. I'm Jewish, and I'm telling you, this is the end of days. And if Israel's leaders don't have the courage to go destroy our biggest enemies, not just Hamas, that's a small player in his view, but Iran's leadership and their missile threat and nuclear threat and Hezbollah," he said, "then we're facing the end of Israel." And this is the first time I've heard somebody speak in that stark apocalyptic terms about this. The world changed. The world for Israel changed on October 7th. There's the pre-October 7th and there's post-October 7th. Just like when you and I and so many Americans went through 9/11, there was a pre-9/11 mindset and a post-9/11 mindset. And I guess I would say this, I haven't found a single person. I sat with a very prominent, one of the most influential journalists in Israel today for lunch. And we talked about Ezekiel 38 and 39. He goes, "I don't know, honestly, if we're at that stage, but our government better be thinking about this is the moment. If we are not going to use the moment now with Iran at 84% enrichment, and you only have to get to 90 to 92, 93. When would we do this? When are we going to do this? After we're invaded and Hezbollah and Iran slaughter hundreds of thousands of us rather than thousands? So that'll be the show tomorrow night as you let people hear this in their own words.
We will look forward to seeing it, Joel. Thank you so much. We got to run now, my friend, but stay safe. You're doing great work on the ground. Thanks so much for joining us. I will see you soon back in the land of Israel. God bless Joel Rosenberg. We'll see you again soon. Folks, we talked about Psalm 83 with Joel. Let's close with Psalm 91 and just my exhortation to you to pray that prayer, Psalm 91, that God will give his angels charge over the people of Israel, especially the Israel Defense Forces right now in these tumultuous prophetic times that we are living in. Thanks so much for joining us here today on The Watchman. Until next time, God bless you. And remember, never hold your peace. Hey everyone, thanks for checking out the Watchman Newscast. Make sure you hit the subscribe button so you never miss an upload, and tap the bell icon so you're notified every time a new video is posted. And don't forget to share your thoughts, insights, and comments below. Thanks for watching. We'll see you back here tomorrow.